Good evening, everybody. If we have some people signed in already, we are a little bit early, but we're just going to give a minute before we kick off to allow everybody to join. Thanks for joining so far, though. Okay, well, we like to start things on time, and it is 6 o'clock. We'll start slowly, though, to let people join. But welcome and good evening to today's introduction to the Qualis-Braemar LOC Group Engineer Development Scheme. We're really excited to have many of you with us today, and we're going to be giving it an overview, an introduction into the scheme, a little bit about ABL Group and how to apply. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. You do need to be signed in to YouTube, signed into your YouTube accounts in order to add questions to the comments box to the live stream. If you do have questions and you are finding it difficult to send them through, however, you can always send them to me after the presentation, and we will endeavour to get back to you on that. We'll also be sharing in the comments box links to the actual application on the website and so on and so forth. That's actually already there for you to see now. So please do take a look at that afterwards, and do send us your questions. And I'm going to hand over now to Jake Anderson, our Global Managing Director for Engineering, to kick us off.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you very much for joining the webinar today. I just wanted to introduce you to the speakers today. As Katie said, I'm the Engineering Director at ABL. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about the scheme itself, but I wanted to have some of my colleagues, some of the more recent early career engineers we have in the company to tell you more about the company itself. So I'll just introduce you to your speakers today. I'm Jake Anderson. I'm a naval architect by training. I still practice as a naval architect, and I've been with the company for an awfully long time. Timo, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Timo. So I'm a geotechnical engineer. I've been working with OWC not quite as long as Jake. I joined about 1.5 years ago, and I'm excited to tell you a bit about what I do.
And Paloma?
Hi, everybody. My name is Paloma Medina. I am a naval architect, and I'm on my 4th year of the graduate scheme with ABL. So I will be talking about ABL and my journey in the graduate scheme.
Thanks. Ed?
Hi all. So my name's Ed Yallop. I'm a naval architect based with Longitude Exeter. So I've been there for 2.5 years, and I was a direct entry graduate onto the engineering development scheme. So I'll be talking all things Longitude later.
Thanks. And Katie?
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Tunkener. I'm the Global Group Marketing Manager. I've started at ABL when it was formerly LOC about 6 years ago, and have been working with the Engineer Development Scheme for a few years now. So very happy to accept any questions that you might have in this session and afterwards.
Thanks. So then today, what we want to tell you is about ABL. So you know more about us as a company and what we do. And we think the best way of doing that is for my colleagues really to describe their time at the company. And then also we want to tell you about the engineering development program we have at ABL, tell you a little bit about the mechanics of of the scheme, about why it is the way it is, and what we offer to graduates here, and to tell you how to apply. So that's what hopefully you'll leave with today, and then we'll finish with a Q&A session at the end. Okay, thanks, Katie. So just a little bit about ABL. I won't talk for too long. I'll just give you a high-level introduction there. So we cover 3 markets. We're very much involved in renewables. We started out with offshore wind. We fixed offshore wind. We're now heavily involved in floating offshore wind, and recently we've moved onshore as well. So we get involved in onshore wind. We also get involved in hydrogen, energy transition type projects, energy storage projects, and all sorts of interesting things there. Maritime, we're heavily involved in the maritime industry. We work for ship owners, for trading ships, for installation ships, and we do ship design as well. And oil and gas, so our roots were in oil and gas, really, in the energy business. You know, the future isn't oil and gas, but there's still an awful lot of work in the energy business, and there's some energy transition work to go through within the oil and gas industry. Thanks, Katie. We like to split what we do into 3, really, in consulting and engineering, and both Ed and Timo are in the consulting and engineering part of the business at the moment, where we get involved in that great long list of things that I'm not going to read out there. We get involved in loss prevention. Paloma's working in the loss prevention part of the business at the moment, where we do surveys, we do inspections, and we oversee and we guide marine operations to make sure that they're conducted safely. And we get involved in loss management as well. When things go wrong, we get involved in salvage, in wreck removals, and then in investigations that end up in court, and we get involved in expert witness work. And Paloma will talk a little bit about that as well. Thanks, Katie. I think it's safe to say we're everywhere. All the little dots on the map there are where we have offices. 61 offices in 39 countries. At the moment, we're nearly 900 people, but every day we're taking on people. So we're a big growing company. We're worldwide, and it's really exciting to have that global reach. Thanks. So we have various brands and companies within the ABL group. These are 4 of the brands that are associated with the Engineer Development Scheme, so that we'll sort of talk about today, and that you're here today. But we're all part of ABL. We're all part of the ABL group. We just use the brands to sell sort of specific services, so our clients really understand well what we do. So we've got OWC, offshore wind consultants, that are heavily involved in owners engineering and project management of offshore wind projects. We've got Longitude, that does design and engineering, from ship design through to transportation and installation engineering for offshore projects. We've got INAC, that involved in the renewables industry, doing lots of R&D and very high-tech loads analysis and marine renewables analysis and engineering. And we've got the umbrella of engineering, of ABL, where loss prevention and loss management also sit. Thank you. I put this slide in because sustainability and energy transition is really important to us. We're part of the UN Global Compact, and we've got real targets to grow our revenues in renewables and energy transition. And you know, it's rare in life that actually the right things to do are actually also what are great for the business as well, that provide us with growth opportunities. But we're at that sweet spot in life at the moment where energy transition and renewables are the right thing to do, and they provide great opportunities for the business and for our employees. Thank you. And then just the last thing really I was going to say, just a quick thing there on our offshore wind experience. I think the numbers speak for themselves really. We've been involved in 233 offshore wind projects. I'm sure an awful lot of people didn't even realise there were that many offshore wind projects. And 31 floating projects. Again, floating is something new, and already we've worked on 31 different projects. Thank you. So now I'm going to hand over to Timo to tell you about his experience within the group. Thanks.
Hiya, thanks for the introduction, Jake. So yeah, as I said earlier, I work for OWC, which stands for Offshore Wind Consultants. So you can imagine what we do. I'm part of the geotechnical team, and I joined about a year and a half ago, having graduated in civil engineering, specializing in geotechnical engineering for my master's. Hence, that's how I've ended up within that team. And in these photos, you can just see a couple of examples from volunteering charity days we've done as a company, which are where we take a day out of the office and get together and perform something for the community. And it's nice to spend some time with your colleagues as well in a different setting. So moving on a bit more specifically about what we do, OWC are specialists in owner's engineering, which effectively means we will work with and on behalf of offshore wind developers to build wind farms. And that entails a lot, as you can imagine. A lot goes into creating a wind farm, from its very inception to the point at which it's producing energy. And we get involved with all sorts of that. So we get a lot of different kinds of work throughout a lot of different stages of the project. And some of the things this includes are developing the overall sort of global strategy for producing the wind farm, designing and planning and managing all of the different surveys to acquire site-specific data through which all the different design work is based. And also we work on sort of more specialist studies. For example, I'm in the geotechnical team and we provide some specialist studies, but these also include things like assessing wind and wave characteristics or electrical design, or to be honest, anything you can imagine to with a wind farm will need some sort of more detailed knowledge. So we do both that high level review and planning and management stuff, as well as the sort of more detailed quantitative analysis work. So in essence, as I've said there, what we do is everything to help a developer build the wind farm from scratch. So as a case study for the more sort of general owner's engineering side of it, one of the projects, actually one of the most recent projects I was on, is a climate risk assessment for a wind farm in Europe. And what this effectively was trying to assess the impacts that climate change might have on the wind farm, which is sort of the other way you sort of normally expect it. You normally think about how a wind farm sort of contributes to mitigating climate change through renewable energy. But this was in fact the other way around. And it meant we needed to consider things like changing environmental conditions, which might affect the sort of the feasibility of the wind farm in future. So examples I've got here: change in wind speed, which might affect, say, your energy output. Changes in temperature might affect sort of durability of the wind farm, and your increases in storm frequency may affect how well designed and how much safety factor you have against the loading. So just at the bottom, you can see two figures that we've sort of found from literature, different research papers. And obviously we had to do a lot of research for that, trying to work out exactly what conditions might change and how likely they are. So on the left is sort of an example of wind patterns across Europe changing throughout the future. And on the right is sort of projections of sea level rise. So these are two things we had to consider. And with all the factors that we found and sort of the changes that we've assessed, we then have to look at how vulnerable the wind farm is to those changes. So that was quite an interesting scope that I was exposed to recently. So in terms of my role specifically, while I do get involved in that owner's engineering stuff, predominantly I sit within the geotechnical team. And we have quite good geotechnical and geophysical capability, which basically means we provide services relating to analysing everything to do with the seabed. So generally characterising the behaviour of the materials in the seabed, the soils, as well as how foundations might behave within them. So as I said before, it does overlap with owner's engineering, as it is a key requirement for sort of developing a wind farm, but tends to be a slightly more focused specialist study that you can sort of get into deeper analysis work with. And similarly, this kind of work is relevant throughout the project cycle. As the various surveys you do throughout the project gradually build up the knowledge you have about a site and how you characterize it. So a couple of examples of things I've done within my team as well. So I've done a fair few desk studies, which are effectively very early stage studies for wind farm sites. And this is using any sort of data you can get from the public domain that's freely, widely published and available. And it's before you have sort of any survey site-specific data, just to get an initial idea, initial understanding of the site. And this will be used sort of to help define your exact site boundaries and see which areas within a vicinity might be favorable or unfavorable. So yeah, as you can see, sort of what we have here on the left is mapping of various different seabed conditions, all of this publicly available information, although sometimes harder to find than others. And on the right, you can see sort of our conclusions regarding, for one particular project, which areas might be most favorable and unfavorable based on various conditions. And these conditions might include things like the various seabed depths you get across the seabed surface and sort of shapes and patterns along the seabed, as well as things like the geological conditions sort of below the surface, which might affect what kind of foundations are possible and how feasible they are, and ultimately how much that will affect the project. So another example, which is slightly further on in the process of developing a wind farm, is helping to develop a ground model. So this is much more quantitative than the previous case study, which is a desk study is very qualitative in nature based on sort of the level of data you have. But ground models are developed through the project and are effectively based on the site-specific survey data that you get. And it's often quite large amounts of data across large areas. And you need to combine this all to try and understand the site in a bit more detail. So here what we've got is on the left, we've got a mapping of the different seabed soil materials present throughout the site. You can see it's very complicated in there. So when you can't see any of it all under the seabed, it's quite a difficult task to characterize, but that's part of the challenge, part of the fun. And on the right, you can see various properties that we've derived through statistical analysis, collation of data, as well as applying sort of our own understanding and judgment where things aren't so clear, in order to characterize each one of these different materials as best as we can. And this is an iterative process, and it goes on. It's worth mentioning that a lot of this work is kind of very much your own, and you can do what you do with it. So we do a lot of R&D, and for example, this work on the right is based on some tools that I developed myself. So there's freedom to sort of think about how you best want to do the job, and always have your own input, which is one of the best things I found about working here. You always have space to do your own input and to provide the best work you can, regardless of whatever processes people already do. So that's a brief summary of what I generally do, and I'll pass you over to Paloma for a different side of the story.
Hi, thanks, Timo. Hi, everybody. So I will be talking about loss prevention and loss management. First, I'll talk a little bit about me. I come from a sailing background, and it was my passion for sailing that took me to study naval architecture at the University of Southampton. When I entered Southampton, all I knew were sailing boats. But during my degree, I found out that the maritime field is very broad, and there are many interesting things happening. So when LOC offers a graduate scheme, which allows you to work in such a large variety of these maritime jobs and trains you in them and lets you travel, I knew this is where I wanted to go. I'm now in my fourth and final year of the scheme, and I'm very happy about my decision. I've started in the Exeter office. I moved to Singapore for a year and a half, and I am now in the ABL London office. During this time, I have been involved in ship design work, renewable energy projects, oil and gas projects, analyses, expert witness cases, and a lot more projects. So it's been a great learning experience where you get to start working on real projects from day one. You get to do a little bit of traveling, and you have a fantastic team worldwide which supports you. I've added some photos here of some of my journey in the graduate scheme. So the first image on the left, this was the first week into the scheme, where they took us to shipyard training in Newcastle. They introduced us how the shipyard works, how they function, the health and safety aspects, which is then key when you go on to any attendance during your projects. The second image is taken inside the engine room of a cargo vessel. So as part of the training, again, you get to spend 1 week on board a vessel. Here you can learn how the vessel operates, you get to see the crew work, and more important, you get to see and feel how it is to be on board. When you work on projects, there will be many occasions where you talk to a captain or an engineer who are on board the vessel. So it's good to know how it feels to be on the other side. And the last picture was taken last year in Rotterdam, where I went to witness the loadout of an offshore substation for one of our projects. This was going to be loaded onto a barge and then taken to the offshore wind farm for installation. I've never felt so small until I saw that, how big it is. And through the images, you can actually see a nice evolution of how I started going to a shipyard for training and how you later go on to the shipyard as part of your projects. Thanks, Katie. So I'm now working in the MWS Renewables team. MWS means Marine Warranty Surveyor, and we provide third-party technical support for projects to make sure that they're efficient and cost-effective. So I am very interested in renewable energies. I believe that we need to reduce our carbon emission, and I'm happy that ABL share the same opinion. As Jake has explained in the previous slides, the company is growing exponentially in this sector, and the world is as well, which means there are very interesting projects going on. ABL is a big player in the field, so you get to be part of this energy revolution. I've added on the right some key figures just to see how much ABL is involved in renewable energies. So what do you do as an MWS? So part of the work we do is a bit of document review, make sure that the analysis is done correctly, that the design is correct, and that they have the right procedures for operations, which you then get to attend. This can be onshore and offshore, and ensure that the operation is done as per the procedures. You also have to do some suitability surveys and the GWO training. The GWO training is the Global Wind Offshore Training, where you spend 1 week learning about working at heights, firefighting, manual handling, first aid, and offshore survival, which this helps you prepare for any incident that can occur when you're on attendance. This was a lot of fun, and you get to jump on ropes, and they take you onto a big swimming pool where they add some big waves and some lightning sounds and rain. Really good and very useful for any incident that can occur. One of a few of the projects that I have worked on during my time here has been the helping support the installation of the NNG offshore wind farm up in Scotland. And actually the image from my previous slide was regarding this project. I've also been working in the Sophia wind farm and on cable installation projects and many more. Thanks, Katie. Right, so the next slide is the Marine Expert Witness and Litigations. So our consultants have a lot of experience providing expert witness opinion and advice on claims, accident investigation, loss management, practically every aspect in the marine industry. So one of the biggest projects that I have been involved during my graduate scheme was working with Jake, who was the expert witness during this dispute case. The project involved a designer who had made some errors during the designing stage. And when the shipyard started construction, the vessel could not be built. and required some modifications. We had to investigate the vessel design, the errors, and determine what had gone wrong. So afterwards, Jake went to present the findings to court, and this was quite an interesting project. They're very intense, but it's a great learning experience to be a part of them. When you're a first-year graduate and you're placed in a project like this, where the title is expert, you think, well, I'm not an expert, but you will be surrounded by a team of highly qualified and actual experts who will support you and take and push you up to that level. I've also been involved in some investigation cases where, for example, there was a cable laying operation offshore which had some issues, and we needed to determine whether the cable had any damages and needed to be replaced. So we would use software such as RINA to try to position and model the cable to determine what if the cable had been bent too much and if it needed replacing. So these are some of the projects and my experiences in the EDS scheme, which have been really interesting, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Any questions, do feel free to ask on the chat, and I will pass you on to Ed to continue his presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Paloma. So as Jake briefly mentioned at the start, I work with Longitude and Exeter. So contrary to what Paloma's done, where she rotated around a few offices, I've been a direct entry in Exeter for the past 2.5 years. So working in Longitude, which was the design and engineering side of the group. So I think the main reason I'm here is just to highlight that if you are looking for a direct entry role where you don't want to rotate around offices, there are opportunities there. I think from my experience in those 2.5 years, I wouldn't change it from what I've done. The variety of work I've done, still being a direct entry, has been brilliant. So I think I just want to touch on a few of those points here. Thanks, Katie. So within Longitude, we're covering a wide array of services. So anything from marine operations engineering, where we've got transportation analyses, installation engineering, decommissioning, which we're seeing become a lot more prevalent in the oil and gas market now. And then the complete opposite side of it, where you've got full new vessel designs, upgrades, conversions, that sort of thing, where it could range from a small 5-meter rib, or it could go up to a 90-meter offshore supply vessel. And then the final part, which is a lot of the work that I get involved in, is the subsea cable engineering. So this is route analyses, vessel mobilizations, cable installations, and the likes. So this is sort of the full package of installing a cable offshore and any other offshore assets as well that are being installed. So I think it's a really broad amount of things that we do, and I think it's nice to be involved in that from such an early age within your engineering scheme. Thanks, Katie. So the first case study that I just want to present was a project I was involved with, which was actually down in Plymouth, so local to us in the southwest. So this was for a modular floating wind platform. It was a small 15 kilowatt demonstrator where the client wanted to prove this modular system. So this is a bolt together system that would fit on the back of any transport truck and could be transported around the world more cheaply than the larger scale platforms that are out there. So this is a really interesting project as we were working directly with the client to help him develop his design. So when he came to us, there are a few parts of the criteria and such that he wasn't familiar with, in which case we sat down with him, spoke about them, and started to iterate through the designs with him, which this started out just with a static stability assessment. So looking at flooding of these tanks to make sure it passed any of the necessary criteria before it was even being designed. And then this transpired into a structural analysis, so making sure that his bolted connections were sufficient for the loads that we were experiencing. I think one of the most important or interesting parts was actually getting involved in the model testing down at the University of Plymouth. So we got to attend for a day and review the test procedure for this small scale model test. It was a 1/14th scale model, and seeing something you've sat there for hours looking at on a screen and modeling, and actually seeing it in person getting thrown around in some pretty large waves, as this was meant to be designed for typhoon conditions, was really interesting. And it was that sort of additional step we needed to validate our model. And then we could move on and pull out some of the accelerations that they needed to make sure that the wind turbine foundation was sufficient. But a really interesting job following it from an initial sort of on a scrap of paper design to something that was actually being model tested and validated. Thanks, Katie. So the next part is what I've spent a lot of my time involved in Exeter. So this is using a software called Orcaflex, which is the primary offshore operations software. So this can range from anything from full cable analysis packages. So Paloma briefly mentioned about her cable scope that she did on the MWS side, looking at a failure. So we're actually trying to stop those failures happening by telling our clients what wave heights they can operate in and such to make sure that the operation is safe and nothing is broken when offshore. And then that can range from a cable lay up to a first and second end pull in on a foundation, or even the abandonment of these cables on the seabed if the weather does get serious. Another one we've got is the top left image there, which was for a plough overboarding. So it looks quite small on that screen, but I got put into perspective with this one when you realised it was 110 tons and the size of a 2-bed house, and you're sort of moving it around on a little screen. So I think seeing these things in person definitely puts it into perspective. But then you've got the opposite end of the spectrum where we've got an ROV deployment on the middle left-hand image, which is a 36-meter vessel deploying a 100-kilogram ROV through a moon pool. But we're still employing the same processes, but it's a brilliant range of projects that you can get involved in. The other one as well we've got in the bottom right was an offshore lift operation. So again, another end of the spectrum in terms of what goes on offshore. So this was for a 300-meter long semi-submersible crane vessel lifting a 9,000-ton topside, which very interesting job to do, and just the range of them is brilliant. And the final one we've got in the bottom left was a spool loadout. So this client came to us with a bit of a problem. They were loading the spool out of their manufacturing plant and they ran out of quayside. So we're looking for a solution, and the one we came up with and helped them develop was this semi-submersible barge that was acting as a ramp down into the sea just to extend their quayside. This one was a brilliant project because the client had a 20-centimeter tolerance, and this was a 1-meter diameter spool that was being loaded out. So really tight tolerances to get a 90-meter barge to move less than 2 or 20 centimeters. It was definitely a tough one. Cheers, Katie. So apart from being sat behind a desk doing those sorts of analyses, over my time at Longitude Exeter, we've managed to get offshore as well and actually out on site. So a couple of these images here are from inclining experiments I've recently attended. The last one was actually last week up at AMP Tyne in Newcastle for a new build barge, which unfortunately won't stay that shiny and new from those pictures on the right there. But these sorts of experiments get you really good grounding and offshore experience, or even site experience, where you can actually see some of the things that you've been looking at on screens and talking about with clients in person. And it really gives you that extra grounding on what you're doing and why you're doing it. So these inclinings were done to validate the stability booklet that the other naval architects designing the vessel had done, just to confirm the lightship's conditions. We had a couple of other ones out in Guernsey, so a nice sunny one as opposed to up in Newcastle. And then we also had one up in Northumbria for a small inland passenger ferry. They're really interesting just to get out on site and get away from the desk and actually see something in person. Thanks, Katie. So the final one I want to talk about is a full vessel concept design. So this was actually one of the first projects I was involved in when I first joined Longitude 2.5 years ago. So this was for a full design for a buoy handling vessel. So this was working on the specification and the actual concept, which ranged from anything from resistance and propulsion calcs, sort of the rough hand calcs you get taught when you're at university, all the way up to CFD hull wake analyses to validate those. And then we also got to specify a diesel electric hybrid system for it, which we're seeing becoming particularly prevalent in the industry at the moment with the transition to greener fuels. And then even the likes of sitting down and helping draftsmen and other naval architects develop a general arrangement, so you get a feel for how space is allocated on a vessel and how that can be used. And then we also got the opportunity with these guys to go offshore. They invited us out for 3 days so we could experience what their current vessel that they wanted to replace was doing. And we got to chat to the crew and see what other things they would like to change about it. I think a complete opposite end of the spectrum, that vessel concept design, thinking at sort of the more higher level, as opposed to going into the nitty-gritty parts where you're looking at specific parts of analysis. You're more looking at the overall picture of a vessel, making sure it meets all the specification points you're outlining and those sorts of things. So I think what I'll do, I'll hand back to Jake and he can tell you a bit more about how to apply for the scheme.
Thanks, Ed. Well, hopefully those presentations gave you a flavour of some of the things we do here. So I just want to talk a bit about the actual scheme itself. We run a 4-year programme here. Now, I know that some companies run 2 years, but our experience of running this scheme for over 10 years now is that we want to give our staff the opportunity in each of their placements to really become a proper member of the team and to learn exactly what's going on in the office. And to do that, really, we find that people have got to spend a year in each of the offices or companies to really to gain that experience that from their colleagues. So what we have two streams really. We have an international scheme, we call it, where graduates rotate round between the different offices, and then we have a direct entry stream as well, where people are taken on directly by an office to address an immediate employment need. But the rotations, anyway, we have four of our brands within ABL that participate in the scheme. We've got AWC, INAC, ABL, and Longitude, and listed there are some of the offices that one might travel to and be posted in one of the rotations. Thanks, Katie. So what will you achieve from our scheme? So our scheme is accredited with ICE, with the Institute of Marine Engineers, and with RINA. I think with those 3 institutes, then that covers a really broad range of disciplines, actually. Particularly IMarEST covers mechanical and electrical and many other disciplines as well. And they provide a route in, because obviously those are all professional institutes, registered with the Engineering Council, so they provide a route into becoming a chartered engineer. And we think that route to becoming a chartered engineer aligns with what we need as a company. We need our employees to get a wide range of skills beyond your education, and so then we think that the rotations allow you to really allow you to work in different market sectors and in different fields, and to become a rounded engineer, actually learning something from one market sector and applying it to another, really adds some value. We think that with us you learn flexibility, because we're an engineering consultancy, or we're a marine and engineering consultancy. So we lead and we work in the market, and when the market changes, we have to change as well. So throughout your career, a career with us, you're doing different stuff all of the time, and we need to adapt, and we need to stay ahead of the market, and we need our employees to learn that as well. And we're very much an international company. We've got offices, as you saw, all over the world, and all over the country, and we build our teams to deliver work from all of those international companies and offices and locations, and we provide our participants on the scheme to actually move around the offices and hopefully get some international experience as well. Thank you. So here are a few photos slightly orientated towards pleasure. I'm not saying you're going to be going sailing every day or going canoeing to the pub, I think, which is the bottom left one. There's a range of experiences. All of those photos are taken with the participants on our scheme on there. From the less exciting ones of going, that's tank diving, it's called, on the top, going down to do ballast tank inspections. I think that was on an inclining experiment, to some fun jobs as well of I think the top left one was sailing in the renewables, UK Renewables Regatta. The top right one is on the Costa Concordia, where we had a big site team to manage the wreck removal of the Costa Concordia, and we had one of our engineers in training out on that project. Thank you. Here are a couple of testimonials from some of our participants. On the left there, Kevin Sersky, he was one of the first people who actually went through the engineering development scheme. There you go, he's describing his experience there. But the good thing about Kevin is, of course, he's gone through his career. He's now the managing director of our Norway office and ABL Stavanger. And it's great to see participants on the scheme rising up through the company, which is, of course, exactly what we want. And then Charlotte Dodge there on the right-hand side, she's in her 4th year, and she's currently in the ABL London shipping team, getting involved in some of the things Paloma talked about, marine accident investigations, expert witness work, things like that. Thank you. So how do you apply? Well, you've done the right thing, first of all, by attending this webinar, where you can learn about ABL. We're going to have a Q&A session very shortly. So please ask any questions that you might have to find out more about the company. By the 30th of January, what we need from anyone who's interested in joining us is a cover letter and a CV. And you would send that to recruitment. You can see the address there. We then run a one-day assessment day that is scheduled for the 17th of February. We think last year it was entirely online. Previous years it's been entirely in person. We think it'll need to be a hybrid this year, and that will allow us to include people who are not in the UK or people who don't feel that they would like to attend in person. From between the 30th of January and the 4th of February, we'll go through our shortlisting, and then we'll send out the invites on the 4th of February. But the 17th of February will be our assessment day. So if you're keen to join us, then please block out that date in your calendar now. Thank you. So I think that's probably enough from me, and I'll just return to Katie now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jake and Paloma, Ed and Timo. That was brilliant, and lots of really interesting things for us all to think about. Lots of information, and we hope that everybody online enjoyed. We've got lots of great questions. So to kick it off, I think quite an important question would be actually, how many candidates are you looking to take in September 2022? Maybe Jake, probably a question to you.
We're not completely rigid about it. I mean, in my mind, we're looking around 5. But if we get 10 fantastic candidates, we'll take on 10. If we only get 2, we'll take on 2. But our idea is we want 5 or thereabouts, really. And
that doesn't include for the direct entry?
No, that's right. No, so direct entries, I mean, actually, we take on participants for the scheme all the way through the year, really, and continuously. This is a nice opportunity for people who are only interested in direct entry to contact us, and we can forward CVs onto relevant people. But for the rotation scheme, we'll be looking at around 5 this year.
Great, because we did have a question with regards to if you could apply to both the graduate scheme and the direct entry, which of course is a yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. And then we can have a conversation with you and see where your preferences lie.
Sure. Perhaps just hovering a little bit on the direct entry scheme. Ed, maybe a question to you. I mean, perhaps you could let us know a little bit from your side what you think the benefits of the direct entry is, maybe as opposed to going on the graduate scheme.
Of course, yeah. So I think from my experience so far, I always knew I wanted to do renewables, and making sure that I did that. So the extra office was a logical choice for me. I really enjoy the design consulting part, so longitude was the natural choice there as well. So I think although I am direct entry, you still get a wider range of experience, but I sort of knew exactly where I wanted to go and where I wanted to stick. That's not saying that once you're direct entry, you're locked into that. There's always scope to have a chat with Jake and the other members of the team to move somewhere else if you so wish. But I think from my experience, I've thoroughly enjoyed the direct entry part, because that's where I wanted to be.
Great, thanks. And I think you drew on something there that's a really interesting point in terms of, you know, still having the choice to kind of move on elsewhere and try something different within the group. Question actually to Paloma, how much choice do you think as a graduate you do get, or have you had, in terms of choosing where you'd like to go over the 4-year scheme?
You actually get quite a lot of choice. It really depends how many offices are available at the time, and who else, you know, how many of the other graduates want it. But they will always listen to what you want and try to make that happen.
Great. Okay. Jake, anything to add to that in terms of choice about not just moving different offices, but also between sectors, or wanting maybe to specialize in a particular service line later on in the scheme?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think having run this for more than 10 years now, what's been interesting is talking to people on the scheme who've spent a year in one office, and they go, "Hey, I love it here. I want to stay here forever." And then you talk to them about, "Oh yeah, but you haven't actually done really much site experience. You haven't really done this." And we have a conversation really about their future and about how to make them good engineers for the future. And often then you have conversations and you just sort of explain the other things in life that will help them become rounded engineers. And sometimes people say, "No, I want to stay here." And okay, that's fine, we can accommodate that. But often people they then do move to another office and get a different experience in life, and then afterwards they go, "Oh yeah, actually that yeah, it's a good point. Now I see a wider viewpoint." And you know, engineering is all about judgment and skill and experience. And the more people you talk to, particularly when you're starting off in your career, and the more exposure you can get to different things and different topics, then really I think it makes you a better engineer, and that's what we want.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jake. I think another thing that's quite important to address is in the current climate that we're living in, obviously it's called the Engineer Development Scheme. Development is the key word there, and for development, you know, exposure is really key to the experts and the specialists within the company. We are hopefully at the tail end of the pandemic, but what I'd quite like to hear is, you know, during situations where, due to government guidelines, there isn't an enforced work from home guidance, you know, how do we manage to keep up within the scheme, making sure that our candidates get the exposure they need, they get to the exposure, not just the specialists, but also to the projects. Perhaps Timo, perhaps you could offer some insight into that, into your own experiences during the pandemic.
Yeah, sure. I actually started sort of in September 2020, which was not the first lockdown, but we were pretty much in full lockdown. I think I had 1 week of going to the office before getting sent home for quite a few months. And initially, yeah, I was very worried about that. I thought, how would I possibly sort of learn a lot and get integrated and get set up with the culture? But actually, it really didn't hinder me at all. And I found that, yeah, I got very used to it. And the system we have set up is very good. It's very smooth. So you always have access to everyone right at your fingertips, and everyone's always very responsive. So both, I think, the system we have set up and the sort of attitude of everyone who works here, who's very ready to help out and just, yeah, spend time with each other, even if it's online, is great. And obviously that improved when we came to the office, and I sort of was exposed to that. And yeah, I can't say it wasn't a nice thing to be seeing people in person. But I didn't sort of feel like I'd suffered before I was even exposed to that at all. It definitely felt very fluid.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Any other comments to that, maybe from Ed and Paloma? Anything that you'd like to add?
Sure, I can give you my experience. So I was based in Singapore when COVID started, and the company from the beginning were really helpful in setting an office in our houses. So making sure that we had laptops and the computers worked, we had screens, suitable tables and desks. So that was really good from the beginning. Later on, when you had to change placements, they were also really understanding if you wanted to work from home, from where you're from. So I got to work a bit of the time in Spain, which is where I'm from, before moving back to London, as London was in lockdown. Then in London, again, we're in lockdown, so we have to go back home. And they made a very flexible, first, actually, it was a flexible home and office working, which was nice. So we had to go into the office 3 days of the week, and we got to be with the rest of the team and see some friendly faces. And then staying at home as well, which is it's also nice. I think a few of us have gotten used to being home and have a nice setup. So yeah, the company's been very flexible and always trying to help, really.
Brilliant. We've actually got some really important questions as well with regards to qualifications and eligibility. Someone has put the question across as to whether if you have a master's in mathematics, you would be eligible to apply. Jake, do you have any thoughts to that?
So what we want is competent, capable graduates who are technical and with an interest in what we do. That's the most important thing. We do employ physicists. Do we employ mathematicians? I don't see why not. So no, I think that would it's the first time I've actually been asked about a mathematician, but I don't see why not, because obviously maths is a technical subject. So I think for accreditation with Royal Institute of Naval Architects would be a problem, but I think with IMarEST, there's a route to becoming an engineer through that particular institution. So I think the scheme is flexible enough to actually really to take definitely any engineering degree, and I think any technical degree. I mean, maths is a STEM subject, isn't it? So I would say that would be fine. I think what we would be looking for, though, during the assessment day process and the screening, is a real interest in marine and renewables and offshore energy, and really the subjects at the core of the company. I think if you're a mathematician, you just fancy giving it a go, we would be looking for that extra sort of interest in the company.
And Jake, another question for you. Could you possibly give a little bit of insight as to why only master's degrees are applicable for the graduate scheme, not an undergrad degree?
So we only take on M's, really, because to become a chartered engineer, you need an M. And the scheme is designed to be 4 years, and really we didn't necessarily want to take people on and then, like, after a couple of years they disappear off. For direct entries, that's a bit different, and actually over the years we've taken on industrial placement people and all sorts of things like that. So I think for direct entries it's a bit more flexible, but for the actual program where we have to organize the rotations for 4 years, we need a bit of structure and certainty there, and really we need people to have the academic qualification to allow them to become chartered engineers.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Jake. Another question, that because we've actually had quite a few people write in a little bit earlier, they're going to be graduating in a couple of years' time, so great to have you here and great to get the interest anyway. A question that has propped up is as to whether we have any summer placements or other internships or programs like that whilst people are still working towards their degree. I think, Jake, you're probably your best place to answer that question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all, every office takes on summer placements. I think it's a really important thing for you guys to all do. It helps us as employers know that that you are interested in what we do. So I think it's good for you. It's good for us as well. Often, to be honest, a lot of the summer placement people we meet, the good ones, actually end up coming and working for us. So yeah, I would encourage every student really to take on summer placements. The best thing to do is actually write to your local office directly. We don't organise that centrally. So if you can look on our website, you can see where all our offices are, and just write to the local office directly to organise that.
Yeah. I think worth noting on that as well, do take a look at our careers page on the ABL-group.com website. And, you know, you're always welcome to send through a CV, cover letter, and see what kind of interest might pop up, because we're always looking for new people, and we're always growing. So you never know, there could be the program for you, just waiting for you. A little question, I think, to everybody else, to Paloma, Ed, and Timo, actually. You know, a big part of the application is putting together the cover letter. Perhaps you guys, sort of in a couple of words, just give a little bit of advice as to what you think people should be focusing on in that cover letter. What do you think are the key qualities that the selecting committee will be looking for? Paloma, do you want to go first?
Sure. What would be the key things? I'm not sure. That would probably be Jake who's reviewing the cover letters, but I can say what I did, and I think I just try to show a little bit of who I am, what I like. I was graduating from naval architecture, so I'm quite passionate about boats and offshore and renewables. So I just wanted to really pass that this is what I liked, this is what I wanted to work on, to Jake and the team when I wrote my cover letter. Really, I guess also show that you are, I don't know, you like the maths and the physics behind it. But yeah, I think just a bit about you and your potential, really.
Great, thanks. Ed, do you want to offer some insight?
Yeah. So I think from my side, what we do in Longitude is a lot of problem solving. So having that drive to sit down and find out what's fundamentally wrong with a problem and how you can solve it, instead of blindly following methods, that sort of thing, actually understanding the basics behind it before going. But I think the best point Paloma touched on is passion. We're at the kind of edge of that whole renewables transition, and ABL is very much at the forefront of that. So we want people who can really drive that forwards and just love all things renewables in the marine industry.
Super, thank you. Timo?
Yeah, the other two have covered it pretty well, as has Jake. But I'll just say, yeah, I think two things that we're really looking for are that passion they've spoken about, and having really strong technical capability. So as well as sort of the problem solving, that includes being able to pick things up quickly, and really understanding things, and being adaptable, and all the things that you go with your sort of general engineering course. And yeah, learning how to learn effectively.
Brilliant.
Because we're looking for people at the start of their careers, and it's a very crazy industry. Everything's always changing, and we all still have a lot to learn. So we're always learning. So I think that's really important.
Excellent, thank you. Jake, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that as the reviewer, the part of the selecting committee.
Yeah. I mean, I think rather than asking people to fill in a standard application form or something like that, we say a cover letter because it gives you an opportunity to show yourself, as Paloma said, to describe who you are. You know, you've got a bit of freedom there, so you can think what we're like as a company and what we want. We've described here what we're looking for and we offer. So you need to let us know that this is actually what you want, and you've got the freedom to write and to let us know who you are. Try and get the spelling right as well. That's always important.
Brilliant, exactly. Before we end, some really key questions. Obviously, this is to a certain extent, this is an international engineer development scheme. You know, we have invited students from all over the world really to join on this call, and students in the UK as well. There are many international students. What kind of support, Jake, is available to students from outside the UK in terms of visa support? We're getting some questions specifically with regards to a tier 2 visa, and also other kind of support, resettlement, this sort of thing.
Yeah, we take on people internationally. We do move people around. The tier 2 visa process is pretty expensive. So if we bring someone into the UK, obviously we pay that's an employer's cost. But we probably wouldn't then move someone out again for a year and then bring them back in again. So I think if we had to bring someone into the UK, then they would then stay in the UK for most of their rotations. And that we've certainly had that in the past. We've got 6-7 offices in the UK now, I think. So actually, there are lots of opportunities to gain a really good wide experience in the UK alone, to be honest. But we're an international company. We're very keen to employ people from all over the place because we operate all over the place. So we're interested in international people. We've got plans to expand the scheme more internationally, so we will take on more people in the US and in Asia in time. At the moment, it is being run sort of more Europe-centric, to be honest, with some placements into other regions. Over the next year or two, we're definitely going to be expanding in the Americas and in Asia more, but at the moment it is pretty Europe-centric. So yeah, we would certainly cover visas for the right candidate.
Brilliant. Okay, and I think, you know, we are 1 minute over time, but I think probably just to end this, bit of a difficult question. Apologies, guys, but I think what would be great is actually if Paloma, Timo, and Ed might be able to just in one or two or three words just summarize for you what's the biggest benefit or the best bit of being on the scheme. I won't pick someone to go first so that you can.
Yeah, I'll start.
Organically.
I think one of the best things about it is kind of the way it's divided into sort of smaller subsets of offices and companies. So you kind of get the best of both of being in a small company and a larger group, getting access to sort of really big projects that you wouldn't necessarily be able to in such a small company, but also having that nice community feel and sort of hands-on action that you get from a small company. I think it combines those two really well.
Brilliant. Thank you.
I can go next. I think one of my favorite things is how the team supports you. So you are placed in any office that I've been in. I've always been supported by an amazing team who always push you to be more, to be better, to do better work. So I think that's really important because that keeps you motivated. It keeps wanting to learn. And also in the scheme, you get to move a lot. So you might start a new year, you finish the year thinking, oh, I know about this. And then you move to another office. And again, you see that there's a team surrounding you and supporting you to learn and to push yourself. So that's really important for me.
I think from me is having access to that 900-person group. So you may be within a smaller company within the group, but you've got 900 people out there who the vast majority are experts in their fields. I think our CEO told me that if you're green on Teams, please call, which that ethos is throughout the company. So if you have a question, someone in the company will have done it before or will know what to do, and they're always open to talk about it. So it's brilliant support there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Jake, any parting words on the scheme yourself?
So we want really good, enthusiastic people who are willing to learn and come with us on the journey through the energy transition. So if you're that person, please send us your CV and your letter. Brilliant.
Thank you so much. Well, we have gone a few minutes over. I hope you won't hold us guilty for that. But I think I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our panel today, to Jake, Ed, Timo, and Paloma for speaking. We had some actually lovely comments online. Someone mentioned that you guys would be fantastic ambassadors, STEM ambassadors. So I don't know if that's something that you guys are thinking of, but some people in our audience think you should. So thank you for those comments. And a huge thank you for everyone who's joined us and for your questions, which have been brilliant. If you do have any more questions, you can send them to me. I put an email at the end in the banner at the bottom of the screen. And you can also apply online on our website for the scheme. Applications closed on the 30th of January. Or you can apply by sending your CV and cover letter directly to the email address that's at the bottom of your screen right now. So please go ahead and apply, go ahead and check on our careers page at any time if you're interested in a summer placement as well, or direct entry or anything else. And it's always worth sending a CV in and seeing what comes back. But thank you so much for today, and we hope to hear from you and read your CVs and cover letters very soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Bye.